Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
Chapter 2, It Starts with a Tingle. The next morning, Elliot woke up to a small miracle, not a single email from work, and for the first time since he'd started shaving at 15, no stubble. He ran a hand over his chin, then his jaw, then his entire face, frowning like a man searching for a lost wallet. Smooth, baby smooth, impossibly smooth. "What the hell?" he muttered, rubbing his palm more vigorously against his cheek. Not even the faintest hint of roughness met his touch. It wasn't just a close shave, it was as if the follicles themselves had packed up and left town without leaving a forwarding address. He stumbled out of bed, nearly tripping over last night's discarded jeans. His balance felt off somehow, like his center of gravity had shifted. The floor seemed farther away than usual, and his steps felt lighter, his hips swaying slightly with each movement in a way they never had before. He stared at his razor with suspicion, picking it up to examine the blades. "Did you do something while I was sleeping? Some kind of reverse shaving? Was this a side effect of sleeping next to an ancient goddess, or just a fluke? Maybe he was finally outgrowing puberty, a solid decade late." Elliot shrugged, chalked it up to stress, and padded to the bathroom, the cool tile oddly sensitive against his feet. As he brushed his teeth, he noticed something else. His usually limp brown hair was shiny, bouncy, even. It caught the light like something out of a shampoo commercial, cascading just past his ears in a way that looked deliberately styled rather than bedhead. He leaned closer to the mirror, toothbrush hanging from his mouth. His hair seemed longer too, at least an inch more than yesterday. And was it his imagination, or did his lips look fuller, his eyes wider, his lashes longer and more curved? Elliot scowled at his reflection. "Great, now I look like I belong in a K-pop band. Next thing you know, I'll be wearing glitter and singing about heartbreak in Korean." His fingertips traced the curve of his jawline, which seemed softer, less angular than before. His neck, too, appeared more slender, the Adam's apple that had defined his puberty now barely visible. Even his shoulders seemed narrower, giving his entire frame a more delicate appearance. "This is weird," he whispered, watching his reflection's lips form the words. Those lips that now seemed plumper, pinker, almost pouty. His phone buzzed aggressively on the bathroom counter, jolting him from his self-examination. "Jake, don't forget the movie tonight, and wear something cute. I'm not sitting next to a walking thrift store." Elliot smirked, tapping out a reply while trying to ignore how his fingers looked longer, the nails somehow neater. "Elliot, if I show up in a dress, will you finally stop trying to set me up with Marcy from the bar?" "Jake, if you show up in a dress, I'll buy you dinner, and drinks, and probably propose. You've got the legs for it, buddy." "Elliot, my legs are hairy enough to knit a sweater. Pretty sure that's not the look Versace is going for." "Jake, wax exists for a reason, just saying." Elliot rolled his eyes, but he was grinning. Jake's flirting was relentless, mostly harmless, occasionally confusing, especially when he laid it on thick. Though strangely, this morning, Elliot found himself enjoying the attention more than usual. He glanced down at his legs, expecting to see the usual forest of dark hair. Instead, he found them surprisingly smooth, not completely hairless, but significantly less hirsute than the night before. The hair that remained was finer, softer, and lighter in color. "Okay, this is officially entering Twilight Zone territory," he muttered, running his hands up his calves in disbelief. He straightened up and caught his reflection again. His t-shirt hung differently on his frame, and he tugged it away from his chest with a puzzled frown. The fabric seemed to cling to two small but distinct swellings that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. Not large enough to be obvious, but enough to create a subtle curve where there had always been flatness. "No," he said firmly to his reflection. "Absolutely not. This is not happening." He pressed his hands against his chest, expecting to feel nothing but the usual firmness. Instead, he encountered a tender softness that sent a surprising jolt of sensation through his body. He yanked his hands away as if burned. "Nope, no, this is just weight redistribution, or water retention, or I'm still dreaming." He pinched himself hard on the arm. Ow, okay, not dreaming, just losing my mind. He turned sideways, examining his profile. His waist definitely seemed to have narrowed overnight, creating a subtle but unmistakable inward curve before flaring out to hips that appeared fuller, rounder. It's just the lighting, he insisted to no one in particular. Or maybe I'm coming down with something, some weird flu that makes you curvier. He splashed cold water on his face, hoping it might reset whatever glitch was occurring in his perception. The water only emphasized how different his skin felt, softer, more sensitive, almost velvety to the touch. Get it together, Grant, he muttered. You've got work. Code doesn't care if you're having an identity crisis before coffee. At work, new attention. The office was its usual chaos, code reviews, caffeine, and the faint aroma of pizza that never quite left the carpets. But something was off. People stared, stared. Mark from accounting, who normally couldn't be bothered to acknowledge Elliot's existence, nearly walked into a wall watching him pass. The receptionist, whose name Elliot could never remember despite 3 years of good mornings, smiled warmly and asked if he'd changed his cologne. I'm not wearing cologne, Elliot replied, puzzled. Oh, well, you smell amazing, like jasmine and something exotic. Even Sarah, the company's art director, who usually reserved her attention for cats and concept sketches, did a double take as Elliot walked by, her eyes widening in a way that made him intensely self-conscious. Did you do something different with your hair? She asked, peering at him over her monitor, her usual bored expression replaced with genuine curiosity. I washed it, Elliot replied, unsure whether to be flattered or deeply concerned. His hand instinctively went to his hair, which now definitely brushed his shoulders. When had it grown so much? And why did it feel so silky between his fingers? She smiled, showing teeth that rarely made an appearance in the office. Looks good, you should keep it up. The length suits your face, softens your features. Elliot blinked. No one had ever noticed his hair before, except his mom, and she only did when she wanted to know if he'd showered before family dinner. Thanks, I guess. He hurried to his desk, feeling strangely exposed under the collective gaze of his coworkers. His jeans felt uncomfortably tight around his hips and rear, while simultaneously loose at his waist. His shirt collar seemed to gape, the sleeves too long for arms that had somehow become more slender overnight. As he sat down, he felt a strange pressure against his chest, the unfamiliar weight of the new tissue there pressing against his shirt. It wasn't painful, just different, distracting. And when the fabric brushed against his nipples, they responded with a sensitivity that made him catch his breath. Jesus, he whispered, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. He crossed his legs automatically, then froze. When had he started sitting like that? And why did it feel so natural? His thighs pressed together, smoother and softer than they had any right to be. The seam of his jeans pressed uncomfortably against his groin, which felt different, less bulky, more compact. A cold shiver of realization ran down his spine, but he refused to acknowledge it. Not here, not at work. Hey, Earth to Elliot, a voice called, snapping him from his internal panic. It was Derek, his project manager, standing by his desk with an expectant expression. Did you finish the validation sequence I asked for yesterday? Yeah, sorry, Elliot replied, his voice cracking oddly. He cleared his throat and tried again, alarmed to find his usual baritone had risen to something closer to a tenor. Just uploaded it to the shared drive. Derek stared at him for a beat too long. You feeling okay? You look different. Just didn't sleep well, Elliot lied, focusing intently on his monitor. Too much caffeine. Huh? Derek didn't sound convinced. Well, maybe ease up on the coffee. Though whatever you're doing, it's working for you. You look, I don't know, healthier, glowing even. Glowing, Elliot repeated weakly, like radioactive. Derek laughed. No, man, you know what, never mind, just keep up the good work. As Derek walked away, Elliot slumped in his chair, wishing he could dissolve into the carpet. What was happening to him, and why was everyone suddenly noticing him? At lunch, he pulled on his favorite ex-girlfriend's old t-shirt, a relic from college he wore for comfort on stressful days. It was pink with a faded band logo, something he usually hid under a hoodie. Today, he didn't bother with the hoodie. The office felt unusually warm. The shirt fit perfectly, like it was made for him. Not baggy in the shoulders, not tight across the chest as it would have been yesterday. Instead, it draped elegantly over his new curves, accentuating the narrowness of his waist and the gentle swell of his chest. He frowned, glanced down, and realized the shirt hung differently, not tight in the chest, but fitted. His waist looked narrower, hips a little fuller. A lot fuller, actually. The t-shirt now hugged what could only be described as an hourglass figure. "Sweet mother of code," he whispered, tugging at the fabric. His hands, he noticed with growing alarm, looked different too, fingers longer, more tapered, nails somehow perfectly shaped despite never having been manicured in his life. He tugged the shirt, trying to convince himself he'd shrunk it in the dryer. Or maybe it was the new detergent. Or maybe he was losing his mind. Maybe the stress of the new project had finally broken him, and this was some elaborate hallucination. But the reflection in his computer screen didn't lie. His face had changed too, cheekbones higher, jawline softer, nose slightly smaller. His eyes seemed larger, framed by lashes that could only be described as lush. His lips looked like he'd just had collagen injections, full, pouty, naturally pink. He ran his tongue over his teeth, finding them straighter, whiter. Even his tongue felt different in his mouth, smaller, more delicate. "This can't be real," he whispered, but the sound of his own voice, lighter, melodic, unmistakably feminine, told him otherwise. He excused himself to the bathroom, locking himself in a stall. With trembling hands, he lifted his shirt to examine his torso. His flat, masculine chest had definitely transformed into small but perfect breasts, complete with pink, sensitive nipples that hardened at the slightest touch. His waist nipped in dramatically before flaring out to hips that would have been the envy of any Instagram model. And below that, he hesitated then, taking a deep breath, unfastened his jeans. He couldn't look, not yet, but he could feel the difference. The absence of familiar weight, the strange new emptiness where there had once been external anatomy. He touched himself through his underwear, confirming what he already knew. His male genitalia was gone, replaced by something altogether different. "Aphrodite," he breathed, suddenly understanding. "What the hell did you do to me?" Banter and beers. That evening, after spending an hour trying to find clothes that both fit his new body and didn't scream, "I'm in the middle of magically changing sex." Elliot arrived at the theater in jeans that were too tight around the hips and rear, a button-up shirt that strained slightly across his new chest, and a jacket that hung awkwardly on his narrower shoulders. Jake greeted him at the theater with a wolf whistle that turned several heads. "Damn, Elle, did you get a stylist or just finally give up and let me dress you? Because whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Elliot stuck out his tongue, the gesture feeling strangely flirtatious on his new, fuller lips. "You wish." "I do, actually," Jake said, his eyes traveling from Elliot's face down to his feet and back up again, lingering in places that made Elliot's new body respond in unfamiliar ways. "Seriously, there's something different about you. Did you lose weight? Get a haircut? Discover the fountain of youth?" "Just trying something new," Elliot managed, hyper-aware of how his voice sounded. Higher, softer, with a musical quality that hadn't been there before. Jake grinned, eyes lingering a little too long on Elliot's face. "Well, it's working. You're glowing. Are you in love? Please tell me you're not in love. My fragile ego couldn't take the competition." "Only with caffeine and bug-free code," Elliot replied, trying to sound normal despite the fact that his entire body felt like it belonged to someone else. Jake snorted. "That's the saddest love story I've ever heard. Come on, movie's starting, and I got you the big popcorn because you're worth it." He flipped his hair dramatically in a parody of a shampoo commercial. They squeezed into their seats, which seemed narrower than Elliot remembered, or maybe his hips were just wider. Jake sat close, knees brushing, elbow pressing against Elliot's. Normally, Elliot would have shifted away, made some joke about personal space. Tonight, he just felt warm, hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. "You smell different," Jake murmured, leaning close enough that his breath tickled Elliot's ear. "Like flowers, did you switch colognes?" "No cologne," Elliot whispered back, fighting a shiver as Jake's proximity sent unexpected ripples of pleasure through his body. "Must be new soap." "Well, it's sexy as hell," Jake replied, his voice dropping an octave. Makes me want to get closer. As if to demonstrate, he shifted, his thigh now firmly pressed against Elliot's. Elliot swallowed hard, suddenly very conscious of the heat building in his new body. A warmth that pooled low in his belly and between his legs in a way that was entirely unfamiliar, yet undeniably arousing. The movie, he managed weakly, gesturing to the screen where the previews had started. By the time the opening credits rolled, Jake was whispering ridiculous commentary in his ear, and Elliot was laughing so hard he nearly choked on popcorn. But beneath the familiar banter, something had shifted. Every whisper, every accidental touch, every sideways glance carried a new charge, electric, dangerous, thrilling. Is that actor wearing a wig, or did he lose a bet with his hairstylist? Jake murmured, his lips practically brushing Elliot's ear. Elliot giggled, actually giggled, the sound high and feminine, and turned to respond, only to find Jake's face inches from his own. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the movie, the theater, the entire world seemed to fade away. Jake's gaze dropped to Elliot's lips, then back to his eyes. You know, he said softly, you've always had great eyes, but tonight they're spectacular. It's just the lighting, Elliot whispered back, heart pounding so hard he was sure Jake could hear it. No, Jake said with unusual seriousness. It's you, something's different, good different. On screen, something exploded. Neither of them noticed. A strange new feeling. After the movie, they headed to Jake's favorite dive bar, a place where the beer was cheap, the lighting forgiving, and the booth seats had absorbed enough spilled drinks to constitute a health hazard. Jake flirted shamelessly with the waitress, but every so often, his gaze returned to Elliot, lingering, curious, heated in a way that made Elliot's new body respond with disconcerting enthusiasm. His nipples tightened against his shirt, and between his legs, a new kind of arousal pulsed, different from what he'd known as a man, more diffuse, deeper somehow. You ever think about just changing everything? Jake asked, swirling his drink. The amber liquid caught the dim bar lights, creating tiny constellations in the glass. Elliot smirked, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, despite the fact that his body was doing exactly that, changing everything. Like moving to Bali and becoming a yoga instructor, or just getting a haircut. Jake laughed, the sound warming Elliot in places that had no business feeling warm around his best friend. I mean, you ever think about what it'd be like to just be someone else, even for a day, to see the world through different eyes, feel it through different skin? Elliot froze. The question felt loaded somehow. Prophetic, even, he thought of Aphrodite, her marble smile, the strange, tingling warmth that still lingered under his skin that was now smoother, softer, with a subtle glow that couldn't be explained by good lighting. Maybe, Elliot said slowly, his new voice adding an unintentional huskiness that made Jake's eyes darken. But I think I'd still be me, just different. Jake's eyes flickered, intense and searching. I don't know, I think you could pull off anything, any look, any life. His gaze traveled over Elliot's face, his chest, his hands. You've got that adaptability, that fluidity. Elliot felt a flush bloom across his cheeks, unexpected, electric. He shifted in his seat, suddenly self-conscious about the way his jeans clung to his hips, the smoothness of his legs when they brushed together, the weight of his longer hair against his neck. You're being weird tonight, he said, trying to deflect. Says the person who showed up looking like they stepped out of my fantasies, Jake replied, then immediately looked shocked at his own words. I mean, not that I fantasize about you. Much, occasionally, in a totally respectful way. Elliot choked on his beer. Smooth recovery. About as smooth as your new everything, Jake countered, gesturing vaguely at Elliot's body. Seriously, what's your secret? Did you get on some new health kick? Because whatever it is, it's working. If I told you, you wouldn't believe me, Elliot said, surprised by the truth in his words. Try me. Jake leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on Elliot's. I'm very open-minded. I bought a statue of Aphrodite, and now I'm turning into a woman, Elliot deadpanned, then laughed at Jake's expression. See, told you. Jake blinked, then laughed too, though there was a curious edge to it. Funny, but seriously, you look amazing, different but amazing, like you're finally comfortable in your skin. The irony wasn't lost on Elliot. Comfortable was the last thing he felt in this rapidly changing body. Confused, terrified, exhilarated, aroused? Yes. Comfortable, not exactly. They finished their drinks, the conversation moving from philosophy to video games to embarrassing college stories. But the air between them had changed, charged with something new, something neither of them could quite name. Every laugh, every glance, every accidental touch crackled with potential energy. When Jake walked him to his car, he stood closer than usual. "You sure you're okay to drive? You seem different tonight." "Just tired," Elliot lied, fumbling with his keys that felt too large in his more delicate hands. "Elliot," Jake said softly, catching his wrist. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up Elliot's arm. "If something was wrong, you'd tell me, right?" Elliot looked up into Jake's familiar face, the face of his best friend for over a decade, the person who knew him better than anyone. Except that person had known a different Elliot, one with a man's body and a man's experiences. What would Jake think if he knew the truth? "Of course," Elliot said, the lie tasting bitter on his newly plump lips. "I'm just evolving." Jake's thumb traced small circles on the inside of Elliot's wrist, the simple touch igniting nerve endings Elliot hadn't known existed. "Evolution looks good on you." His eyes dropped to Elliot's mouth, then back up. "Really good." For a heart-stopping moment, Elliot thought Jake might kiss him. Part of him, a growing, insistent part, wanted him to, but Jake just squeezed his hand once, then stepped back. "Text me when you get home safe," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Or call, I like hearing your voice, it's nice, soothing." Elliot nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As he drove home, he couldn't stop thinking about Jake's eyes, his hands, the way his body had responded to his touch. Was this what women felt all the time? This hyper-awareness, this constant, humming sensitivity? No wonder they seemed to live in a different world. Alone again. Back home, Elliot sat at his desk, staring at the Aphrodite statuette. The marble seemed to glow in the dim light, her curves more pronounced, her smile knowing. He ran his fingertips over the marble curves, feeling a shiver run up his spine. The stone was warm, almost hot to the touch, as if life pulsed beneath the surface. "You're trouble, aren't you?" he murmured, tracing the goddess's perfect face with a finger that now matched her delicacy. "What exactly are you doing to me?" The goddess only smiled, inscrutable and serene. Elliot sighed, turning away. He caught his reflection in the computer screen and barely recognized himself. His hair now fell past his shoulders in soft waves, framing a face that was undeniably feminine, high cheekbones, large eyes framed by thick lashes, a small, straight nose, and full lips that looked perpetually ready to be kissed. He stood, stripping off his clothes to examine his transformation in the full-length mirror on the back of his bedroom door. His body had completed its metamorphosis while he'd been out with Jake. Where there had once been a flat male chest, there were now perfect, pert breasts, not large, but perfectly proportioned to his new frame, with rosy nipples that peaked at the slightest touch. His waist nipped in dramatically before flaring to hips that curved generously, leading to thighs that were smooth and shapely. And between those thighs, he forced himself to look, to acknowledge what had happened. His male genitalia was completely gone, replaced by the unmistakable anatomy of a woman, delicate folds and hidden depths that responded with surprising sensitivity when he hesitantly touched them. "Holy shit," he breathed, his voice now completely feminine, light, melodic, with a natural huskiness that sounded seductive even to his own ears. "This is real. This is really happening." He turned sideways, examining his new profile, the gentle slope of his breasts, the dramatic curve of his waist, the round fullness of his rear. His entire body had rearranged itself into a form that would have graced magazine covers, with skin so smooth and flawless it looked airbrushed. He ran his hands over his new curves, marveling at the sensitivity, the softness, the sheer foreignness of it all. He was still him, still Elliot, but housed in a body that belonged on a lingerie model. "What am I going to do?" he asked his reflection. "How do I explain this? Who would even believe me?" Jake's face flashed in his mind, the way he'd looked at Elliot tonight, the heat in his eyes, the tenderness in his touch. Something twisted in Elliot's new body, a longing that was both familiar and utterly strange. He turned off the lights and crawled into bed, his silk sheets feeling unexpectedly erotic against his newly sensitive skin. Every brush of fabric, every shift of position sent ripples of sensation through his transformed body. He dreamed of laughter, soft skin, and Jake's lips brushing his ear, then his neck, then lower. Jake's hands exploring his new curves with reverent fascination, Jake's voice whispering his name in tones of wonder and desire. He woke up with a start, heart pounding, body tingling with unfulfilled arousal. And when he looked in the mirror, he couldn't help but notice. His hair was even longer, cascading down his back in glossy waves. His face was unmistakably feminine now, not a trace of masculinity remaining. And there was something about his body, a gentle curve at his waist, a fullness to his hips, a perfection to his breasts that hadn't been there before. Elliot touched the glass, wide-eyed and breathless, watching as his delicate fingers traced the outline of a face that no longer belonged to the man he'd been. "Aphrodite," he whispered, thinking of the statue's enigmatic smile. "What's your endgame here?" Whatever was happening, it was just getting started. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and confusion, a part of Elliot was undeniably curious to see where this transformation would lead, especially when it came to Jake and the new feelings blooming between them.